In the middle of 2025, the chief executive of one of the most profitable car companies in the world sat down and wrote a message to his employees. Inside that message was a single line that shocked the entire automotive industry. He wrote, "Our business model no longer works in its current form." The company was Porsche, and those words were almost impossible to believe. Because for decades, Porsche had been the gold standard of automotive business. Not just a great car brand, the most consistently profitable car manufacturer on the planet. A company that had earned an estimated 18,000 euros in profit on every single vehicle it sold. A company whose identity was so powerful, so refined, so deeply embedded in the culture of speed and luxury that it had seemed untouchable. And yet here was its chief executive admitting in writing that the model had broken. To understand how Porsche reached that moment, you have to go all the way back. Because this is not a story about one bad year. It is a story about a company that nearly died once, came back stronger than anyone thought possible, built one of the greatest brand turnarounds in business history, and then made a bet so large, so expensive, and so badly timed that it wiped out 98% of its profits in a single year. This is the full Porsche story. From bankruptcy to billions to crisis. Porsche was founded in 1931 by Professor Ferdinand Porsche in Stuttgart, Germany. From the very beginning, the company stood for one thing above everything else: engineering and precision. The obsessive pursuit of performance defined the company. Ferdinand Porsche believed that a car should do exactly what it was designed to do, with no compromise and no shortcuts. That philosophy ran through every car the company produced for the next 6 decades. The 911, introduced in 1963, became the physical embodiment of that philosophy, unmistakable in shape, with a low front end, round headlights, and a silhouette so distinctive that even people who had never driven one could recognize it from 100 meters. The 911 was not just a car, it was a cultural artifact, a statement. And it became one of the most recognized and beloved automobiles ever built. Over the decades, Porsche earned around 30,000 victories in motorsport. That number is not marketing, it is a record. The company raced because it believed that the track was the ultimate test of engineering, and the track kept proving them right. But behind the glamour, something was going wrong. By the early 1990s, Porsche was in serious trouble. Sales had collapsed. The American market, which represented roughly 40% of Porsche's global revenue, had dried up almost completely. In 1986, Porsche had sold around 30,000 cars in the United States. By 1993, that number had fallen to fewer than 4,000. The company was burning through cash. Its cost structure was bloated. Its production methods were outdated. Competitors had closed the performance gap. And Porsche, for the first time in its history, was staring at the very real possibility of bankruptcy. Short break. If you are finding this story valuable, now is a great time to subscribe. Every week we cover the brand stories, the business collapses, and the unlikely comebacks that actually matter. Hit subscribe and come back for the next one. Now back to Porsche. In 1993, a new chief executive named Wendelin Wiedeking took over. He was 41 years old, blunt in manner, and completely convinced that Porsche needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. He brought in Japanese production consultants inspired by the Toyota manufacturing system and began tearing apart the way Porsche made its cars. Waste was eliminated, production costs were slashed, quality was rebuilt from the foundation, the workforce was restructured. It was a painful, brutal transformation, and it worked. By the mid-1990s, Porsche's production was leaner, faster, and more efficient than it had ever been. The new Boxster, launched in 1996, opened the brand to a wider audience without diluting the performance identity. Sales recovered. Confidence returned. But Wiedeking knew that recovery was not enough. He needed growth. And to grow, he needed a product that could reach beyond the narrow world of sports car enthusiasts and into the mainstream luxury market. The idea he landed on was both brilliant and deeply controversial. He would build a sports utility vehicle, an SUV. The reaction from inside Porsche was immediate and fierce. The company's loyal fans, the Rennlist community of hardcore Porsche owners and enthusiasts, were outraged. An SUV was everything Porsche was not. Heavy, practical, a family car, a school-run car. The suggestion that the company that had built the 911, that had won at Le Mans, that had defined performance driving for 60 years, would now build a vehicle for the school gates felt like a betrayal of everything the brand stood for. But Wiedeking looked at the market and saw something his critics did not. In the late 1990s and the early 2000s, the sport utility vehicle was not just popular, it was consuming the luxury car market. Every wealthy family wanted one, every major competitor was either already in the segment or rushing to enter it. And critically, 2/3 of Porsche buyers already owned at least one other vehicle, and that vehicle was usually an SUV from a different brand. Porsche was watching its own customers spend their money elsewhere. He also looked at the research. The psychographic profile of a Porsche buyer was not simply a performance obsessive. It included 5 distinct personality types. There were the top guns, driven and ambitious, who wanted power and recognition. The elitists, who treated a car as a car and valued quality over image. The proud patrons, who saw ownership as a trophy earned through hard work. The bon vivants, the jet-setters and thrill-seekers for whom a car was a means of excitement, and the fantasists who saw their Porsche as a form of escape from ordinary life. What united all 5 types was not a love of small 2-seater sports cars. It was a love of what Porsche represented. Prestige, engineering excellence, the feeling of belonging to a world apart from the ordinary. And an SUV, if it was built the right way, could deliver exactly those things. To manage the cost of developing an entirely new vehicle platform, Porsche formed a partnership with Volkswagen. The two companies would share the platform that underpinned both the Porsche Cayenne and the Volkswagen Touareg. Volkswagen would build its version in Slovakia to keep costs low. Porsche refused to follow. Every Cayenne would be assembled in Leipzig, made in Germany. That decision added cost. It also added everything the brand stood for. The Cayenne launched in 2002, and the critics were ready. They called it ugly. They called it a betrayal. They said it would destroy the Porsche brand. Purists predicted that no serious Porsche owner would buy one, and that anyone who did was not a real Porsche person anyway. The market responded differently. The Cayenne was a commercial explosion. Wealthy families who had never considered a Porsche suddenly wanted one. It was the fastest SUV on the market. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 4.9 seconds, beating every comparable competitor. It had Porsche's name on the bonnet, Porsche's engineering under the skin, and the practicality that sports car buyers had always been forced to sacrifice. Within a year of its launch, strong Cayenne sales had helped Porsche pay down its debt to just $128 million and accumulate $2.1 billion in cash. Businessweek ran the headline, "This SUV can tow an entire car maker." By 2007, the Cayenne accounted for 1/3 of all Porsche sales worldwide. The company that had been on the edge of bankruptcy in 1993 had transformed itself into the most profitable car manufacturer in the world per vehicle. In 2003 alone, during a period when the global auto industry was struggling, Porsche announced a 22% increase in net profit. The Cayenne had not just saved Porsche, it had made Porsche richer and more powerful than it had ever been in its history. What followed was a decade of extraordinary financial performance. Porsche expanded its product range with the Panamera, a 4-door luxury sports sedan that created an entirely new segment, and the Macan, a compact SUV that reached an even broader audience. By the late 2010s, the SUVs that the purists had despised were generating the majority of the company's profits. The 911 remained the soul of the brand. The Cayenne and Macan were its financial engine. And then came the electric vehicle revolution. The automotive industry had been watching the rise of Tesla and the accelerating shift toward battery electric vehicles for years. Every major manufacturer faced the same fundamental question: how fast do you move? How much do you spend? And how do you protect the identity of a brand built entirely around the sound, feel, and experience of a combustion engine, when the technology underneath that experience is being replaced by something entirely different? Porsche's answer, announced with great confidence in the late 2010s, was to go all in. The Taycan, Porsche's first fully electric vehicle, launched in 2019. It was technically impressive. It had genuine Porsche performance credentials, and it was received with real enthusiasm by the automotive press. Porsche announced an ambitious target. By 2030, it aimed for 80% of its sales to be fully electric. To reach that target, Porsche began spending at a scale it had never attempted before. New production facilities, reworked factories, a new in-house battery operation, software development teams, charging infrastructure. The investment was enormous, running into billions of euros across multiple years. By 2025, the company expected to invest 3.1 billion euros in a single year alone. And then the market did not cooperate. The Taycan, after its strong initial reception, began losing momentum. In 2024, global Taycan deliveries fell by 49%. In 2025, they fell a further 22%. The electric luxury market, which Porsche had assumed would follow a smooth upward curve, instead moved in what the company's own chief executive described as unpredictable ways. Interest went up, then down, then sideways. In China, the problem was even more acute. China had been one of Porsche's most important growth markets for years. But in 2025, something fundamental changed. Deliveries in China dropped by 42% compared to the previous year. Part of this was weaker luxury spending as the Chinese economy slowed. A larger part was competition. Chinese brands like BYD, NIO, and Xiaomi arrived with electric vehicles that offered advanced software, strong performance, and prices that Porsche could not match. The German badge, long a symbol of aspiration in China, was no longer the deciding factor for a growing number of buyers. Many Chinese consumers were choosing intelligence and value over heritage. At the same time, the United States imposed new import tariffs that hit Porsche directly. The company estimated the tariff impact alone added roughly 700 million euros to its costs in 2025. Porsche had no manufacturing presence in the United States, and building one would be a matter of years, not months. All of these pressures arrived simultaneously. The billions spent on electric vehicle development were sitting on the balance sheet as write-downs. The Chinese market was retreating. The American market was becoming more expensive to serve. The Taycan was selling far below expectations. A 2.7 billion euro goodwill impairment reflected the deflated value of everything Porsche had built toward its electric future. The financial result was almost incomprehensible for a company with Porsche's history. Full year 2025 operating profit fell 98%. It went from 5.3 billion euros down to just 90 million euros. Group operating profit fell 92.7% to 413 million euros. Return on sales collapsed from 14.1% to 1.1%. Global deliveries fell 10%. Around 13,000 fewer vehicles were delivered compared to the previous year. The company that had been the most profitable automotive manufacturer in the world was earning almost nothing on 32 billion euros in car sales revenue. And so Porsche reversed course. The 80% electric target by 2030 was quietly abandoned. Combustion engines that had been scheduled for phase-out were extended. Electric vehicle platforms that had been under development for years were shelved. Around 1,900 permanent jobs were cut, in addition to 2,000 temporary positions already eliminated in 2024. The new chief executive, Michael Leiters, who took over on the 1st of January 2026, framed the new direction in 3 words: leaner, faster, desirable. So what does this story actually mean? The Porsche story is not simply a story about electric vehicles going wrong. It is a story about the tension at the heart of every great brand, between staying true to what you are and becoming what the world seems to want you to be. When Taycan launched the Cayenne in 2002, the purists said it would destroy the brand. He ignored them, and the Cayenne saved the company. The lesson everyone drew from that moment was that bold brand extension works. That Porsche could be more than it had always been, that the audience could be broadened without the identity being diluted. But the Cayenne worked for a specific reason. It delivered exactly what a Porsche was supposed to deliver. Speed, prestige, engineering excellence. It was a different shape, but it was the same soul. The people who bought it were paying for the same thing they had always been paying for when they bought a Porsche. The feeling of being connected to something exceptional. The Taycan was different. Not because it was bad. The Taycan is by most measures a genuinely impressive vehicle. But electric performance, however technically brilliant, does not yet feel the way a Porsche is supposed to feel. The sound is different. The experience is different. The emotional transaction between a driver and a combustion Porsche is something that has been built over 70 years of racing history and engineering mythology. That does not transfer automatically to a new technology, no matter how much money you spend. And Porsche spent the money as if it would. The deeper lesson here is the same lesson that runs through every story on this channel. Whether it is Disney building a theme park in France without understanding French culture, or Walmart entering Germany without understanding German retail, or Porsche spending billions on an electric vehicle transition without truly understanding what its customers were buying when they bought a Porsche, the pattern is the same. The most dangerous moment for any successful brand is when it confuses its product with its identity. Porsche's customers were never buying a combustion engine. They were buying the feeling that the combustion engine delivered. And before spending 3 billion euros a year trying to recreate that feeling with a different technology, someone should have asked whether the feeling was transferable at all. That question is expensive when you ask it after the fact. Porsche's chief financial officer said in late 2025 that 2025 would represent the trough before a recovery. The Cayenne Electric, launching in 2026, represents the company's best near-term hope. The 911 continues to generate the strongest demand of any model in the range. And there are signs that Porsche is returning to the principle that made the Cayenne work the first time, focusing on fewer products with cleaner identities at higher margins for customers who are buying the brand as much as the vehicle. Whether that recovery comes quickly or slowly, the Porsche story is not over. This company has been here before. In 1993, with a fraction of its current resources and a market that had essentially abandoned it, Porsche found a way back. The Cayenne was an act of creative courage disguised as a commercial calculation. The next act of that kind of courage is the one the company is looking for right now. If this story resonated with you, make sure you subscribe because every week on this channel, we dig into the marketing failures, the brand histories, and the business moments that shaped the world we live in today. I will see you in the next one.